if people had seen the pain he was in, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, if I'd been an animal, they would have shot me.
Christmas weekend, we had a handful of patients coming in with COVID. By New Year's, 2 hands full. Now we open a ward and we fill it in a day.
Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And anybody that doesn't take it seriously, it is the worst thing. And you really do have to take it serious.
So this is one of the COVID positive wards in the hospital where some of the sickest patients are currently being looked after. They don't yet need intensive care, but they may well do in the coming days.
On the COVID wards at York Hospital, they're now treating more patients than at any time in the pandemic.
Good morning, Mr. Hutton.
Good morning.
How are you feeling this morning?
Yeah, not too bad.
Dr. Kim Chandler is the lead consultant on the COVID wards. 63-year-old John Hutton has now been a patient for 48 days.
The worst part about it was when I went down to the ICU. That was the scariest thing I have ever gone through. And I said something, I didn't think I was coming out of it. It was very, very scary. But luckily, I made it, and I'm glad.
John's not that typical in terms of how long he's been here. He's been here 48 days today. Normally patients are in for a week to 2 weeks before we start to then make a recovery. John's recovery has been a lot slower. Now that's probably because John had to spend some time in intensive care, needing more invasive therapies than we can offer on this ward.
In recent weeks, there has been a surge in the number of patients who are sick enough to need hospital care. Here on the COVID wards, the pressure has been relentless. And with every new admission, it increases the strain across the entire hospital.
Most days we are at capacity and we have to do a lot of juggling and moving and praying and hoping to get through to the next day. But in reality, the hospital will be full, we predict, I think in 2 weeks' time. If we can wean him off, he's potentially home tomorrow maybe.
2 weeks ago, there were 107 COVID patients across the York Trust. Today, there are 179.
I woke up about 6 o'clock in the morning, could barely breathe, coughing, high temperature, 39.4 temperature. We called NHS 111, answered a few questions. And by the time we put the phone down, the ambulance was at the end of the drive.
I struggled to breathe. I could take 2 or 3 steps and that was it. I feel like fainting. So when they brought us in, they checked us. Had pneumonia.
We see the sickest people in the hospital. We see a lot of death. We see a lot of patients who can't see their relatives. So we have to be their relatives for them, as well as their nurses and their doctors.
So through the admissions board, we can see what patients are coming into the hospital. We're getting quite a lot of patients coming in with an increased shortness of breath.
On the COVID assessment unit, there is a steady stream of new arrivals coming into the hospital.
Hiya Tracy, it's Rowena, one of the nurses.
50-year-old Tracy Himsworth was diagnosed with COVID before Christmas, but was brought back into hospital after developing blood clots on her lungs.
When I couldn't breathe the other day and my husband and my daughter honestly thought that they were going to lose me, it was awful. It was an awful experience.
Dr. Donald Richardson is the Deputy Medical Director at the York Trust. He says they are still coping, but things need to change.
I'm worried that we're getting very close to the kind of scenarios that we're already seeing down in London, where hospitals have breached the capacity, even for their surge capacity for COVID. You know, we've converted another ward this week. We're filling that one up today. I imagine by the end of today that will be full. And then we've got another 2 wards within our COVID surge plan that we're thinking will probably convert by the end of this weekend.
We need to abide by the rules. People need to stay at home and take it seriously for the sake of themselves, for the sake of their loved ones, and for the sake of us here in the NHS, that there's only so much we can do, there's only so much we can cope with, and we are getting overburdened. And if we don't reduce the rate of COVID in our area, we won't be able to cope.
With the vaccine rollout, there is a ray of light, but on the front lines of COVID care, there are still dark days ahead.
Yeah, I just hope now they can get me sorted and get me back home with my wife. It's been terrible, very upsetting. Very, very upsetting.
Jamie Coulson, BBC Look North.